Disk management. So we're going to talk about the disk management tool. This entire lesson is going to be dedicated to that because there's a lot of stuff we do inside disk management. As an A+ technician, you're going to use this a lot. So disk management is a GUI application, graphical user interface application, that we use for analyzing and configuring our hard disks. You can get to it under the computer management tab, and then under storage you'll see disk management, and it'll load into the right panel. You can also get into it under your administrative tools under your start menu. So the first thing we're going to see here is we can see whether or not the disk is online, healthy, or online with errors. If it's online, that means it's in normal disk status when the disk is accessible and functioning properly. Healthy means it's a normal volume and the disk is accessible and functioning properly. So it's even better than being online, right? It actually is operating properly. If you're online with errors, this will be shown with dynamic disks only, and a dynamic disk is something like a RAID would be falling through the dynamic disk category. It'll tell you when there's errors being detected on a dynamic disk. Okay, so it's online, meaning we're overcoming those errors, but you may want to look in that disk and get it fixed in the future. So here you can see we have one disk or two disks here. We have the C drive and the system reserve drive. They are simple disks. They're of basic type. They're both NTFS, and they are healthy. And you can see the C drive is our bootable one. And there's a page file as well on that disk. And that is, we're looking at the size here. It's only a 25 gigabyte disk, 24.9 gigabyte disk, right? And we're almost out of free space. We only have 15% free. We have 3.75 gigs left. So kind of the information you can see here in that tab. And again, that comes from up here in the top pane, the top right pane of that disk management. So mounting a disk. So I talked earlier when we talked about file systems that we can actually mount a drive as a map into a folder. So instead of having something come in as a D drive or an E drive, we can actually take this new drive and map it into something like CX space. Okay. And the way we do that is we'll actually go in here where the current drive is being shown. This one happens to be shown as E. We would hit change and then tell it to map to extra space. And I'll show you guys that in the virtual environment in a little while as well. You can also extend your partitions. So when we started out, we have our single disk with a certain amount of space, and we can extend that across the entire disk if needed. So we can shrink or expand that disk up to the full size of the physical disk. Windows Vista and Windows 7 allows you to do that without any data loss. In Windows XP, we had to actually back up all of our data, delete the partition, make a new partition, and copy all the data back. With 7 in Vista, we can just stretch or shrink it by basically clicking on it and adding more space to that and making that disk into a larger size. Shrinking, we do is pretty much the same thing. We could do this in Vista and 7. We would end up shrinking it by right-clicking on it until it's a shrink, and then give it the amount we want to shrink to. You can't make it smaller than what is currently on the drive itself, but you can shrink it down. And in this case, for instance, we have a 10 gigabyte partition. We want to shrink it down maybe only to half a gig so we can make a second partition on the second drive. And again, as we play with this in the lab, it'll make a little bit more sense as we go through it. Assigning your drive letters. So by default, we assign drive letters to our hard drives so we can access them. Our default one is C, which is where our operating system is going to be. If we created a new drive, it would normally show up as E or then F and then G, and we keep going through the alphabet. The problem with this is there's only 26 letters, right? And A and B are already reserved for our floppy disk. So we really only have 24 drives we can have. Now for most users, 24 drives is plenty, right? But maybe you have a really, really big tower or a big server farm, and you need more drives or more partitions to separate users' data. And that's where mounting to the folder comes into play. So instead of giving it where it's E drive, we can actually click the mount in the following directory and create that C:/X space or C:/data or whatever we want to call it. And that way we have a path to it instead of a drive letter. And that way we're not limited anymore to 24 drives. We can actually have as many drives as we want because we can just keep adding letters to it, right? Drive 1, drive 2, drive 3, all the way to drive 358 million. You could do it with a thumb drive as well. Yeah, because disk manager doesn't care if it's internal or external. So you could do it with a thumb drive. That would work just fine. Usually with thumb drives, we tend to keep them as a drive letter just so they're easily pulled and removed. But internal drives work really well with that to create extra space. Adding drives, we can also connect the drive, initialize the drive, and then create the new volume for use. So when I connect the drive, I physically am cabling that SATA connection to it, data and power. I turn on the computer. I then will go in and I will then initialize the hard drive. I'll then see it come online with unallocated space like you see here with this too. I can right-click it and then go to New Simple Volume, and that will give me a drive letter or a drive path like we just showed you in that particular screen. A new spanned volume would be for spanning across 2 disks. So we have one C drive that is logical across maybe disks 2 and 3, because I want to use both of them to give me one 20 gigabyte logical drive, even though they're physically sitting on 2 drives. Or I could do a strike volume, which sounds a whole lot like a RAID, right? That would be a RAID 0 for speed. I can stripe it across disk 2 and 3, or I can mirror disk 2 and 3. If I had 3 disks, I can actually do a mirrored volume. I could do a RAID 5, right, with 3 disks. So those are the kind of things we can do to create those software RAIDs, is all that span, strike, mirrored, and RAID 5. A simple volume is just one disk, one partition. For one disk, multiple partitions, each partition being its own drive letter. If we want to add an array, such as a RAID 0, 1, or 5, we can do that. We essentially tell it like a new span volume. Select the 3 drives we want to use by adding them from the available to the selected, give it the amount of space we want, and then hit next. So as a PC service technician, you're installing the second hard drive in a desktop running Windows 7. The second hard drive is the same make and model as the first drive. You want to provide data redundancy. Which of the following should you use to accomplish this? Will we use disk management, device manager, system configuration, or data sources? Yeah, A, because this is the disk management lesson, it is disk management, right? But what we're going to do here, because we want to create redundancy, we would want to do a mirror, right? So we would go in and add that drive, create a mirror for those 2 disks, and that would create us a RAID 1. That would give us mirroring capability, adding redundancy from a software level.